Utah has been an underdog team for as long as Kyle Whittingham has been running the program. And last year, they rose above everybody. A team that was really struggling under the quarterback that they had in Charlie Brewer. Cam Rising kind of came to save the day, and it's going to be fun to see what they can do, even though they're going to be considered underdogs in 2022. This is a team that has a ton of talent on both sides of the football, and now they kind of have a target on their backs. People are probably still picking USC and Oregon to be the favorites, but this is a team that's going to be up there with those two, one that can compete for a Pac-12 championship to defend their crown, and a team that should be very tough to beat again this season. If you don't know the name Clark Phillips by now, you probably haven't been paying attention to the Pac-12. And I think that Pac-12 After Dark is going to take on a new meeting in 2022. You look at the teams that are going to be good this year. Lincoln Riley is at USC, but I think Utah is a team that you need to pay attention to as well. And this secondary is going to be very talented, very tough to beat. And Clark Phillips is probably the best corner, one of the best at least, in college football. You look at what he did last year, the talent that he faced, and what he did against those guys. It'll be really fun to see what he can do, if he can repeat that success after last year, or if teams are going to figure out how to beat him on a more consistent basis. He has the talent to be a potential first-round pick next year. And honestly, this is another Utah defense that's going to be very stingy, very tough, and very hard-nosed, fly to the football, whether that's in the pass game or in the run game, and Clark Phillips is the leader of that group. Brant Kuithe is a tight end that we don't talk about a ton, and honestly, because he probably plays on Utah, doesn't get a lot of love in the college football world on a national level. But when you look at what he did, he's one of the more reliable targets we've seen in college football, especially for Cam Rising, and that combination is going to reappear again in 2022. There's a lot of options on this offense, a lot of explosive playmakers that can do things for this team to put points on the board. But Brant Kuithe is the guy that you're going to look to, at least Cam Rising is going to look to when he's looking downfield. Is probably a reliable option when he needs to complete a pass. And honestly, the pass game is probably going to run through him. Tavion Thomas is a former Cincinnati transfer that found success at Utah. And last year he had a big breakout year, over 1,100 yards and 21 touchdowns, which is pretty insane. He's one of 3 players returning in college football to rush for 20 or more touchdowns last year, and it's going to be fun to see what he does for an encore. Now, that being said, he only had 204 carries, which isn't a ton, and honestly, that's okay. That's keeping his legs fresh. That keeps him fresh for this year, and that makes Utah's rushing attack even more dangerous. You look at what Cam Rising brings to the table as a rusher too. Teams have to focus on him. So they can't just let Thomas, or they can't focus on Thomas. They can't pack the box because they know that they're going to have to defend multiple assets on Utah's offense and defend many facets of their game. And Tavion Thomas is going to be fun to watch because he has fresh legs and because of what we saw last year. We mentioned Cam Rising, and honestly, he could be higher on this list. I wouldn't have any arguments against that. You look at what he did when he took over for this Utah offense. The offense looked completely different. This was a group that was kind of struggling under Charlie Brewer, and Rising took over, and they exploded. And you look at what they did against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. I don't care who they were facing in terms of starters or backups. That Ohio State team is legit. They have a super talented roster, and Utah hung with them. They were able to make Ohio State sweat it out, and Cam Rising was a big reason for that. Last year, threw for 20 touchdowns. He's also an underrated rusher. I don't think we talk about his legs enough, and I think he's going to be able to utilize them. Again, opening some things up for Tavion Thomas, but he is the key to this offense, one that's going to be very fun to watch again in 2022. Someone has to block for Cam Rising and Tavion Thomas, and there's a lot of talented players on the offensive line. BRAEDEN Daniels is one of those guys, an all Pac-12 selection in 2021. Honestly, it's the big guys up front that deserve a lot of love. Yes, Cam Rising was a key piece, and he's probably the most important factor, but the offensive line is also a huge factor in this offense. And honestly, with what this team has returning, this offense is going to be so fun to watch. I know I say that a lot, but that's how excited I am for this team because of the talent they have returning up front, the skill positions, and even on defense. There's a lot to like with Utah, and even though people are picking USC and Oregon, Utah is a team they definitely have on their radar. Whittingham had to go get some linebacker talent because Nefe Sewell and Devin Lloyd are gone. Those are two huge losses. One of the guys they bring in is Gabe Reid from Stanford. Honestly, this was a surprise. I didn't expect him to transfer from Stanford, but he joins the Utah, another Pac-12 team. And with the history they've had at linebacker, I'm really excited to see what he can do. Last year, 62 tackles, 10 tackles for loss on a Stanford team that wasn't exactly great. I mean, they were improving, and I think that they'll be a little bit better in 2022, but now he joins a Utah team that's going to compete for a Pac-12 championship, and he's going to add to a defense that, like I said before, has a ton of talent. It just comes down to, can they repeat that now with kind of a target on their back, but also kind of being the underdogs? The defense is going to be a big playmaker in that. Linebacker is going to be a question unless, Reid and another guy we'll talk about step up. While everybody focuses on Brant Kuithe at tight end, Dalton Kincaid is arguably the best second string tight end in the entire country. He's another big target, had 14 less catches than Kuithe did, but I think that he is going to be an under the radar option. Even if you look at fantasy football, if you do college fantasy, Dalton Kincaid is a good option. You look at what he produced last year, 510 yards and 8 touchdowns. He only had 101 less yards than Kuithe, and he had 2 more touchdowns on 14 less catches. So that's a guy to pay attention to with teams focusing on Kuithe, on Tavion Thomas, and Cam Rising. Dalton Kincaid could fly under the radar and be a huge player for this Utah offense. MOHAMOUD Diabate comes from Florida, and that was a Florida team with a ton of talent in its front seven, and it was maybe questionable if he was going to be able to start. So he heads west and finds a place where he can play on a more consistent basis in Utah. He had 89 tackles last year, 2.5 tackles for loss. Like I said, there's a lot of competition. Maybe he decided he needed a fresh start and needed a place where he could have less competition, where he can be the guy. And he and Gabe Reid are going to be big playmakers, kind of X factors on the defense. Again, we mentioned that before. Front seven plays a big role, and like I said, there's talent, and it'll be fun to see what Utah is able to do with that talent. Van Fillinger might be a name that flies under the radar, maybe one that outside of Utah people don't really know, but you look at 9.5 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks. This is a guy who can get the job done on the edge. And this front line is going to face an offensive line on a consistent basis in practice that's going to elevate their play and vice versa. And Van Fillinger is a guy that can make plays happen. He can make guys around him better and open things up for the new linebackers they have coming in, and that's a huge piece for this Utes defense. In the secondary, everybody is going to focus on Clark Phillips. There's no doubt about that. But Cole Bishop is a safety that really benefited from teams kind of not really worrying about him. 54 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. That's impressive for a safety. Now, they're probably going to use him more along the line of scrimmage, but I like what he can do in coverage as well. I think teams are going to move away from Clark Phillips' side. And while Bishop might be on his side or might be on the other side, that leaves other players really as the targets for teams when they're trying to pass the ball. And if Cole Bishop can prove that he is just as good in coverage as he was last year, and as he was defending the run as well, disrupting the backfield, this Utah team will be just fine. Again, this is a Utah team that's very exciting. Kyle Whittingham has done a phenomenal job in his time with the program, and there's no reason to believe they'll take a step back last year. This is a team that should compete for a Pac-12 championship. Doesn't matter if USC is good. Doesn't matter if Oregon is good. Utah is tough. They're going to find a way to win football games, and they're going to compete for another title.